Good evening, everyone. I'd like to call to order the Development and Operations Services Standing Committee of December 6, 2021. I'll now read out the Land Acknowledgement. For more than 15,000 years, the First Nations walked upon and cared for the lands we now call home. Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, Ojibwe, and many others who cared for their families and communities the way we now seek to care for ours. The town of Collingwood acknowledges the Lake Simcoe Nottawasaga Treaty of 1818 and respects all of the nation-to-nation agreements that have formed relationships with the original inhabitants of Turtle Island. We acknowledge the reality of our shared history, the current contributions of Indigenous people within our community, and seek to continue empowering expressions of pride amongst all of the diverse stakeholders in this area. We seek to do better, to continue to recognize, learn, and grow in friendship and community, nation to nation. I'm also, before I get to the adoption of the agenda, I'd just like to honor the recognition for today as the National Day of Remembrance and Action on Violence Against Women. Annually on December the 6th, we pause to remember lives lost and impacted by gender-based violence. National Day of Remembrance and Action on Violence Against Women asks us all to take action through education, advocacy, awareness, and courage. While it is over 30 years since the murder of 14 young women at Polytech, Montreal, gender-based violence impacts women and children locally, provincially, and nationally, unfortunately magnified by the pandemic. Adoption of the agenda. That the content of the Development and Operations Standing Committee agenda for December 6, 2021 be adopted as presented. Could I have a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Jeffrey? Why am I not seeing everybody? Councillor Doherty, thank you. All in favor? Thank you. Are there any declarations of pecuniary interest this evening? And business arising from the previous meeting, would there be any? Seeing none. We have a deputation this evening. It's with respect to 31 Huron Street. And Becky, can you please let our deputants into the meeting? Thank you. Welcome to Bruce Kerr and to Don May.
Okay. Madam Chair, can I start?
Yes, please do.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Madam Chair, Your Worship, members of council in committee, I'm not here asking for any motions or directions. I'm simply wanting to bring council up to date on this matter. And that's why I wrote the letter to the mayor and members of council, and it was directed here to this committee today. So my letter of November the 8th to the mayor and members of council and delegation request was intended to advise council directly what transpired at the November 5th Ontario Land Tribunal Case Management Conference on this matter. The streetcar site plan application and the implementing zoning bylaw are located within the Shipyards special policy area in the town official plan and will have a significant effect on the future of Collingwood, the downtown, and the shipyards. Any deviation from the planned and approved policies for the shipyards will have an effect. Sorry, I have to advance the slide. Will have an effect on the existing 300 residential units and the two additional mixed-use developments to be developed adjacent to this site. Change the slide, please. So the Collingwood planning process provides for staff circulation to commenting agencies, and then a public information meeting, which was held on May 17th on this matter. And then you have a staff report with recommendations for approval forwarded to council. And then council does its consideration of the staff report at a meeting which provides for public delegation prior to council making that decision. And this is a very important process that provides council with a professional staff report, the applicant's submission, and any public comments before making a decision as set out in the Planning Act. The next slide. The applicant, Streetcar, has decided to refer their implementing zoning bylaw application to the Ontario Land Tribunal based on delay of decision by the town. The site plan application was not referred to the OLT, even though the site plan was submitted to the OLT as supporting evidence for the requested implementing zoning bylaw. The real concern is the applicant's planning justification report states, the proposed architectural design of Harbour House captures the heritage characteristics of the terminal building in a contemporary form. And the terminals are not part of the Shipyards special policy area. They're outside of that. This stated intent is contrary to the policies of the official plan for the Shipyards and the downtown. And just quickly, next slide. The real, in order to determine official plan conformity, there are really 5 questions. The first 3 come out of the special policy area, and the last 2 come out of the design guidelines, which are part of the official plan for the shipyards. And you have to ask a question when you look at the application. Is this proposal an extension of the downtown core? And does this proposal enhance the core's role as the center of Collingwood? Second, is the design compatible with the downtown core? The whole plan is that the downtown extends itself through the shipyards to the water. And then what are the design elements on site which are inspired by the site's long history as a shipbuilding facility? And the 4th and 5th questions come from the design guidelines. How does this proposal add to the existing shipyards development to be a destination landmark waterfront community with a vibrant downtown feel? And last, how will this proposal help the shipyards, and I've underlined the shipyards, to feel like it belongs in Collingwood, like it developed over time, a seamless integration with the existing town fabric? And I just want to stop here just for a minute back on this slide. If we can just go back to the slide. The second one, I just want to speak to that second point. So recently, after the public meeting on the 17th, a supplementary urban design brief was submitted this past August after the late June meeting with town staff, the applicant's consultants, and the town peer review consultant. And I've been requesting access to this material for the last 3 months with no success. Yesterday, I received a copy from the applicant. There is not one mention of compatibility of the proposed building with the downtown in that new brief that has come in. So this was to respond to the residents' concerns, staff circulation, and this will come forth to you as part of the staff report coming forward. Given the expressed intention of the applicants to capture the heritage characteristics of the terminal building in a contemporary form, this report seems to try and find similarities after the fact with the shipyards. The main official plan policy to recognize the shipyards as an extension of the downtown is, however, an impossible leap for this building without changes to the brick color and to the roof. We've all watched how, I won't go there, but no one would recommend this contemporary white building with a white ultra-modern peaked roof in our downtown. No one would I don't think anybody would suggest that building would fit in the downtown, which is a criteria of the official plan in terms of buildings in there. So the last slide, I just want to make 2 points to you. The first point is we look forward to our new Director of Planning, Building and Economic Development's professional staff report having regard to the official plan policies. The staff report and any public comments can then assist council in making an informed decision regarding these applications. So in other words, before it's dealt with in May at the Ontario Land Tribunal, there has to be a staff report, a staff position, and also your position as the town of Collingwood. So respectfully, and just in conclusion, the public need to see the staff report and have an opportunity to provide council with any comments prior to council taking a position on these applications. Given the significant deviations from the policies in the Shipyards special policy area within the town's official plan, the streetcar applications are very important to the town, the downtown, the public, and the residents of the Shipyards. And that's really all I wanted to say to you as you wait for this process to come forward from staff with the staff report. And we're all looking forward to that, to see what staff is going to say about the official plan and this design. And then hopefully we're back in front of council, and then you'll have all these matters to have regard to. So I just thought you might appreciate that update, and that's why I've come today. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is Mr. Kerr going to speak as well?
Yeah, if you're, we could hold questions till after Mr. Kerr speaks, or you could ask.
Certainly, yeah.
Okay, so I'll turn it over to Bruce. Yeah.
Mute. Am I okay? Can you hear me?
Yes, clear.
Oh, magic presto. This is amazing. Well, good evening. I really appreciate the opportunity to speak to the committee. By way of a very brief background, I've been in this business for about 50 years. I think I started my first job when Don May was still in short pants. So it's been a long time for me. And I have a very special place in my professional heart and in my heart for Collingwood. I've done 2 projects in town. The first one was back in 2000, and I built some bungalow lofts, I think we call them now, behind the Railway Museum. In those days we called it Old Town. And I just digress for a second. The reason Old Town, we chose it, even though we spelt it with an E on Old and Town. It was because we wanted the architecture, the wrought iron details, and the brick and things to respect the downtown as we saw it even back in 2000. And then in 2003, I was president of the Slocker Real Estate Company. It's a Dutch-based company, and we joined forces with the Fram Building Group to develop the shipyards. And as you can imagine, in 2003, we had a lot of things on our plate. But one of the key decisions we made, and I think we were one of the first to really take this process to heart, we held a 5-day charrette. And it was the design and visioning charrette in which we had all our consultants, architects, planners, landscape architects available to the public, to staff, to politicians to come out for 5 days. And then at night, we'd beaver away at producing on the 5th night a scaled plan that showed the shipyards. And it showed it in scale. It showed it in styrofoam blocks and cardboard. But there it was. And the genesis of that was that, or the result of that really was that everybody told us that this area should be an extension of the downtown core. That included homes, that included, the tree names, streets, and it was to take the downtown that rightfully should be there in the absence of the shipyard operation down to its waterfront. And so, the 6-story limits of buildings along the waterside edge, like the side launch buildings you see today, and then the myriad of other townhomes that now dot the site, all came out of that charrette. And, you know, the promise to the folks in Collingwood, to all the citizens in Collingwood, was that this design and the resultant guidelines were to be enshrined in an official plan amendment. And that was done. And it's an exhaustive detail. And it's a very interesting document because it speaks to the architecture. It speaks to the intent of forwarding downtown to the water's edge. It talks about the building elements. It talks about the industrial feel, and it talks about public realm areas that would celebrate the former Shipyards operation. And as a quick aside, I don't know if members of the committee have had an opportunity to see the Fram Building Group's latest design for the spit of land that is in between the side launch basin and the repair basin. But if you do, I think you'll be extremely pleased. It celebrates the very best of the shipyards. It has a base of commercial brick. It has the industrial elements we're talking about, and it looks like a very nifty mirror to the side launch base buildings across the way.
Mr. Kerr,
yeah.
I just want to say I've let you go on 2 minutes longer than the 10 minutes, and I'm just wondering. It's very fascinating, and I love to hear it, but I think I have to ask you to wrap up.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. There's no hook. So I simply wanted to say that I'm baffled by the proponents' non-desire to embark on the process of public disclosure for their site plan application, which would be measured against the existing OP. And I think there's no reason not to do it. And I think the current design has nothing to do with the price of eggs, comparing it to the silos. Anyway, there I am. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Would any members of the committee have any questions? I have one, and this is of staff, actually. We heard some comments about the process that the town's engaging in now that this matters before the Ontario Land Tribunal. And I was hoping that Director Valentine could just indicate to us what our process will be.
Thank you, Chair Hanlon, and thank you to the delegates as well for providing their comments this evening. And as noted, this matter is actively before the Ontario Land Tribunal, so I will not be providing comments on the site-specific questions and comments raised today by the delegations, but be happy to provide some remarks regarding process. Ontario Land Tribunal, or before that, LPAT, and before that Ontario Municipal Board hearings used to be quite rare in the town of Collingwood, but now that there are a number of appeals that are currently on the go in the town and involving the town, and the number of appeals appears to be increasing, staff have certainly identified the need for a more robust process around how council is informed when an appeal is received, how they provide direction to staff and their legal counsel, and importantly, with respect to this delegation, what, if any, additional public involvement and public staff reports are appropriate given a case-by-case evaluation. So staff look forward to presenting some options for council to consider in terms of creating a more transparent and clear process. And we are preparing the staff report, which will be presented in the December council cycle. Fingers crossed, targeting. And at that time, advice will also be provided by the town solicitor. So that matter is scheduled to be in camera. I'm quite certain that the members of this committee heard Mr. May's request that a public staff report be produced in this case. And I'm also quite certain that those members and council overall will take that request in consideration as they deliberate the next steps on this file. Thank you so much for the ability to provide some comments.
Okay, thank you, Director Valentine. That is so helpful. And thank you so much to Mr. May and Mr. Kerr for appearing tonight. Our community is so focused on the shipyards, as is council and staff. Thank you. All right, next up on our agenda is the interim control bylaw updates. So I'll turn this matter over to CAO Skinner.
Thank you, Chair Hamlin. Not a lot of changes this week, so we'll run through the normal deck so that the committee and hopefully there's some folks from the public also listening know exactly where we are in driving this important project, set of projects forward. Next slide. We're doing this because council did ask us to update them and the public each week. And so this deck includes all of the items that are requested, negotiations, building permits, et cetera, as noted here and in the originating resolution. Next slide, please. The situation hasn't changed. We do have a safe and available water supply. Council's been very proactive. Staff have also worked hard to move this forward. We do have an interim control bylaw that is temporarily and transparently paused development for everyone. But I want to communicate again that everybody who was ready to go with a development application for 2021, so ready to put their shovel in the ground with their approvals at hand, was able to continue. And most residential renovations and additions can continue. So if you're looking to expand your living room or other things, you can talk to the building department and see what you would need to keep moving. We have maximized the chlorine, and we have a project out to look at whether we can get any more water through chlorine use. And we have some new ultraviolet treatment that's expected in 2023. So we're closing in, but have not reached the capacity to meet our expected growth if our plant expansion is complete by the end of 2025 or early 2026. So we need to keep an eye on that, a very close eye. Next slide, please. This update has two brief parts. The first part is on the water capacity, so the plant itself. So under the leadership of Director Slama, we've had a number of things that have been proceeding quickly. The main change that's on this slide today is that, oh, sorry, I moved that change. So no large updates on this, slide today. Same as last week, lots of work is happening, but no new milestones here. Next slide, please. As well, we are generally on track with our schedule. I've given you a heads up that there probably will be some changes to this slide 6, not to increase the or extend the end date, hopefully, but the team has taken an approach that we've been telling you about to pre-buy some of the components, such as the type of UV treatment and the type of filtration. And some of this work, knowing which brands we're designing for, will be able to help us accelerate through the middle and stay on track. So we're grateful to our Ainley and ACOM design team, as well as our staff, to make sure that we've taken the most intelligent approach we can to this project. So updates to come, not expecting the end date to change on this overall approach slide. Slide 7, please. The remaining water supply has not changed. There were a number of items that will be going to council at the next meeting, or the next meeting, one of the meetings in December, for some small changes to exemptions. However, as of today, we have the same numbers as you've seen for the last number of weeks, which are 497 single development units remaining until the plant is expanded. And if the additional ultraviolet is added in 2023, we would be able to increase that number to the bottom middle number, 1,288 single development units. Without getting into our buffer, which is our safety factor. Next slide, please. The second half of this is about our land use planning policy study. And it is also leading to a water allocation policy that I'll talk a bit about in a second. Next slide. Just as a really quick update, during the interim control bylaw, I mentioned that everyone who was ready to go was able to get a formal exemption from council to proceed in 2021 and early 2022. The exemptions process is just to get us through this land use planning study period. Once the study period is over, the draft is that we would be proposing to have a water or a services allocation policy for water and wastewater. So if you've been granted an exemption, you can go forward now. And if you haven't been granted an exemption, then your planning application will continue to be processed, but council planning decisions would follow the future exemption. And once the interim control bylaw is over, we would be moving to using the new policy for the allocation of water. So if you have an exemption, it's best if you are able to use it. This is our land use planning policy study. There's no changes to the underlying schedule. All that we've changed is we've moved the green arrow that says we are here down to this week, where there's preparation of version 2 report with recommendations that will come to the council meeting on December 20th. We are getting some feedback from the public and from developers and the local developers association that they would like some more opportunity and or time to comment on the draft policy. So staff are thinking that through in how we can accommodate getting all of the input that those that are interested would like to provide to council. Most likely, and I will just go to the next slide, please. We have a set of dates on this slide I'll go through briefly in a moment, but most likely what would happen then is that we would be looking at moving some of the adjustments to the zoning bylaw forward while we enabled some more time to develop the allocation policy, though, so that all in the community are as comfortable as they possibly can be with the recommendations to council on how to allocate those services. I do want to emphasize here the December 3rd date. December 3rd was the closing date for comments on the policy. So we now have those comments. And pending council's endorsement of the recommendations on the 20th, in late December, we would provide notice of a statutory public meeting. And you'll see there's a number of dates there, but mid-March would be the last day for appeals. And should those all happen in time, we would be able to remove the interim control bylaw and move to the new framework. If there are appeals, then we would need to discuss with council an extension of the interim control bylaw until those were complete. But our intention, we hope, is to move forward with an intelligent approach that won't trigger appeals and keep our community moving forward. Next slide, please. The building statistics overall are shown here and haven't changed, I believe, since the last update. And in any case, for those who are interested in building later in this agenda, there is also a detailed update on our building department and their work in general. The short message on this slide is that we are moving forward with a lot of building and are on track to an amount that's similar to 2020. Next slide, please. And there hasn't been a change in the slide 13 since last week, which shows the dark blue, or the second largest slice of the pie is on the left side by project and the right side by percent of water, the amount of the exemptions which have been gone out in building permits and are now deemed to be used. So you'd see that there's still about half of the water that was exempted that can be used through additional building in our community right away. And I believe that is the last slide, and I'll turn it back to you, Chair Hamlin, should there be any questions for myself or the supporting directors. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that update. Would any members of the committee, Councillor Jeffrey?
Thank you, Chair Hamlin. Through you to the CAO. In terms of us beefing up our communications, I worry that we're not relying on people seeing our slide presentations at these meetings to know the information regarding the conditions of the ICBL exemptions in relationship to the land use planning policy. Has that been issued in writing to all those who have received exemptions in the ICBL and clarified very clearly?
Thank you, Councillor. Through the chair, thank you. Thank you, Councillor Jeffrey. We did do quite a bit of advertisement to the community in general about the opportunity to comment on the outcome of the land use planning study and the draft policy. Things like the town pages, social media, boosted posts on social media, so they hopefully reach more folks. I think there was about 5,000 locally boosted viewings of the post. I'm not positive, and I don't know if I understood you correctly, if we sent a special notice to people who had previously applied for exemptions to provide comment on the policy. I don't know if that was your intention.
No, Councillor Jeffrey?
Thank you. Through the chair. Sorry, I wasn't clear enough. With respect to the exemptions expiring once the new land use policy procedure is in place, I'm assuming everybody that has an exemption for the ICBL is under the clear understanding that if they don't use that exemption by that time, and if we haven't, are we communicating that clearly?
CAO?
Through the chair, I actually would like the Director Valentine to comment on that if that's okay.
Of course.
Thank you. Through you, Madam Chair, to the councillor, and excellent question. We have had a couple of different touch points with those who have received exemptions directly, direct communication, not through social media or other channels. And those communications to date have focused on their ability to continue on with their projects and or continue on with the planning process if they haven't received an exemption. I do think that your suggestion has merit, that potentially an additional communication being clear that, as the CAO mentions weekly in her presentations, that the exemption is to the interim control bylaw. The exemption is not to the new framework. So we can certainly use the same mailing list to provide that level of clarity.
Yeah, thank you. That was a great question and answer. Thank you.
Thank you.
Would anyone else have any questions concerning the update? Seeing none, I have one. With so much before us every day now on the impacts of climate change, I was wondering if staff could comment, and I don't know if this might be Director Slama's area, but in the design and ultimate construction of our new water plant or expansion of our water plant, will we be taking into account the rising sea levels and other things that we should be in terms of the impact of climate change as we move into the future?
Thank you, Chair Hamlin. Yes, to answer your question, we've been going through the process of the preliminary design for our water treatment plant expansion. We have included aspects of climate change that would be relevant not only to the location, the site location of the water treatment plant being on the shoreline right by Sunset Point, but also some of the aspects that might in the future affect water quality. So looking at if there's any various elements of climate change, maybe if we don't need to have the means to address them today, we want to make sure that we're incorporating the ability to adapt and have some of these considerations. included in the design. I am working with Manager McGinnity to provide an update to committee on the water treatment plant expansion and how we're progressing through our design. And so we'll be hoping to make a presentation and under the updates in our January meeting, which we can give a bit more details on some of the aspects that we're considering.
Okay, thank you so much. Okay, our staff reports today. We have quite a few before us. In fact, there are five staff reports. The first one is P 2021-30 part lot control exemption for Indigo Estates. This is for Eden Oak McNabb. Who would like to do the overview of the staff report?
Thank you, Chair Hamlin. I can start if you would with some just a quick brief overview, and we do have Senior Planner Brian here today to take you through more details of the staff report. But if committee would indulge me, the overall purpose of the report is to recommend the passing of a bylaw that would authorize the lifting of part lot control for a 2-year period, and that would allow the creation of 5 lots within this registered plan of subdivision. And just being very cognizant that there are members of the public joining us today or watching the proceedings that may not be familiar with the terms that I just used. Part lot control, what that is it allows municipalities to prevent the further division and transfer of land within a plan of subdivision unless the required approvals are obtained. So when we talk about lifting or exempting lands from part lot control, what that means is lots would be able to be created within a certain time frame. And this type of tool is used commonly across the province, and it's available to municipalities under the Planning Act, especially where a number of lots or transactions are being created, and particularly where the proposal doesn't affect the overall nature or character of the plan of subdivision. So that's just a quick overview of the tool and why a municipality may choose to use it. In this particular case, the further division of the block in question was anticipated through the original draft approval, and the proposal has received an exemption under the interim control bylaw. And with your permission, Chair, I would ask Senior Planner Brian to provide further detail on the staff report.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So as Director Valentine has pointed out, this matter pertains to a request for a part lot control exemption. This is on the western portion of a block within the existing registered plan of subdivision. That's the Eden Oak McNabb plan of subdivision, also known as Indigo Estates. As noted, the exemption will result in the creation of 5 lots for single detached dwellings, and that is the eastern end of Kirby Avenue on the south side. As noted, water capacity and allocation is available for these lots via an exemption from the ICBL back in July. These lots have long been recognized as being appropriate, and we were waiting on a clearance from the Conservation Authority as there was some concern with potential flooding from the Pretty River, which was actually resolved through a tribunal process a number of years ago. And the lots were approved, or the Conservation Authority provided their clearance.
Okay, thank you. Deputy Clerk Dahl, would there be any members of the public who would like to comment on this staff report?
Thank you, Chair Hamlin. If there's anyone in our attendees list that would like to speak to the staff report tonight, if you could please press the raise your hand feature at the bottom of the screen. And it appears that no one wishes to speak to this report at this time.
Okay, I'll read in the recommendation that staff report P 2021-30 part lot control exemption bylaw, Eden Oak McNabb Indigo Estate subdivision, western portion of block 287, Plan 51M1162, town file number D1206221 be received, and that bylaw number 2021-083 being a bylaw to authorize part lot control exemption for a period of 2 years to allow for the creation of 5 lots on the western portion of block 287 Plan 51M1162 for single detached dwellings be enacted and passed. Could I have a mover and a seconder, please? Mayor Saunderson and Councillor Doherty. Would the standing committee have any questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? And that's unanimous. Thank you. Item 7.2, this is with respect to staff report P 2021-35, heritage designation of 243 Birch Street. And I see Community Planner Teakle. Are you taking this away?
I believe Director Valentine is going to give a brief introduction, and then I will.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Hamlin and Community Planner Teakle. So this report deals with the required steps necessary to designate a property under Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act. The request to designate the property was made by the property owner, and it was supported by a technical evaluation undertaken by a qualified expert who outlined the heritage values of the property, and was also supported by the Heritage Committee. And as noted by the Chair, Community Planner Teakle will take us through the details of his staff report. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next slide, please. 243 Birch Street is located on the east side of Birch Street, close to the south end of the block between 3rd Street and 4th Street. The owners of the property, Stuart and Valerie Brown, have requested that it be designated to protect the dwelling for future generations. The property contains an 1886 Queen Anne style dwelling with Gothic revival influences. The dwelling is associated with the Burnmeister and Lawland family, who lived there, or owned the property rather, for 120 years. This is a Part 4 designation, meaning the property would be individually designated and is outside of the downtown Collingwood Heritage Conservation District. As such, the property's designation bylaw would govern the protection of the property and not the district plan. Next slide, please. The owners made the request in January of 2020. The request was received by the Heritage Committee and recommended in favor of at their March 13th, 2020 meeting. Some of the benefits of heritage designation for the owner include access to incentives, including grants and tax relief to assist with conservation of the property. Some of the benefits for the town at large include publicly acknowledging a property's heritage value, ensuring that our built cultural heritage value and its design, historical, and contextual value is maintained for the long-term benefit of future generations. Designation is the best way to ensure that significant properties are not demolished or altered in a way that will lessen or remove their cultural heritage value of the property. Designated properties also contribute to our sense of place in Collingwood and are a key part of maintaining an attractive and interesting town for both residents and visitors. So a cultural heritage evaluation report or designation report was completed by Sue Murdoch Historical Consulting, which is appended to the staff report. That report concludes that the property warrants designation. Specifically, the report found that the property has value in all 3 criterions set out in Regulation 906 of the Ontario Heritage Act for determining cultural heritage value. Those criteria are design and for physical value, historical or associated value, and contextual value. Next slide, please. So in terms of next steps, publication of a notice of intention to designate. If no objections to the designation within 30 days, council may pass a designation bylaw within 120 days of the notice of publication, or may opt to withdraw the intention to designate if objections are received the council finds have merit. The designation bylaw would include a statement of cultural heritage value and interest and a description of the heritage attributes as outlined in the report in Appendix A. Notice of passing will be published and the owner and the Ontario Heritage Trust will be served with the bylaw as well as a notice of passing. There's a 30-day appeal period where anyone could appeal the designation bylaw to the Ontario Land Tribunal. If there are no appeals within 30 days, the bylaw comes into force, is registered on title, and added to the town and provincial heritage registers. If the bylaw comes into effect, the owner would be eligible for heritage-related incentive programs offered through the town and is also subject to the requirement for heritage permits to support exterior alterations. Next slide, please. So based on the request of the owner and the subsequent evaluation, staff are recommending that council initiates the process to designate 243 Birch Street under Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act by directing staff to issue a notice of intention to designate, and further that council directs staff to bring forward for consideration a designation bylaw for 243 Birch Street within 120 days of the publication of the notice of intention to designate. That's all, and I'd be happy to take any questions.
Okay, thank you. And the photos were great. Are there any questions or comments from the public before the committee considers the report?
Thank you, Chair Hamlin. If there's anyone wishing to speak to the staff report, please press the raise your hand feature at the bottom of the screen. And there's no one wishing to speak.
All right, I'll read in the recommendation that staff report P 2021-35, heritage designation of 243 Birch Street be received, and the council initiates the process to designate 243 Birch Street under Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act by directing staff to issue a notice of intention to designate, and further the council directs staff to bring forward for consideration a designation bylaw for 243 Birch Street within 120 days of the publication of the notice of intention to designate. Could I have a mover and a seconder? Councillor Jeffrey and Councillor Doherty, thank you. Would the standing committee have any questions or comments at this time? Councillor Doherty.
Thank you very much, Chair. Just a quick comment. I'm very pleased to support this staff report recommendation. I admit that the building has been so beautifully restored that I was surprised to learn that it actually had not been designated up until now. So congratulations to the owners. They've done a lovely job.
Thank you. Okay, then, seeing no other comments, all those in favor? Thank you, and that's unanimous. The next item, 7.3, refers to P 2021-36, delegated authority and criteria for condominium exemptions. Director Valentine, over to you.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I will be speaking to this item in its entirety. The goal of this report is to improve transparency in the development review process as it relates to condominium descriptions. And so that we're all starting from the same level of understanding, condominium descriptions are a process or method to divide ownership in real property, and they're governed by the Condominium Act. And there's actually 5 different types of condominium descriptions available, and those are called standard, phased, common element, vacant land, and leasehold. And when many of us hear the word condominium, it automatically conjures up sort of an apartment style or high-rise type of development. But condominium descriptions can be applied to any type of built form, singles, towns, and even to no buildings at all. A parking lot can be condominiumized, a community garden, and so on. So the term is much broader than perhaps the understanding that is common in the public. Once registered, condominiums are operated by corporations in accordance with provincial legislation, and those corporations are responsible for the operation, maintenance, and associated costs of shared private infrastructure, amenities, and services. So the Condominium Act requires planning authorities like the town of Collingwood to essentially follow the same process to approve draft condominium descriptions or amendments to those descriptions as they would for a plan of subdivision under the Planning Act. However, the Condominium Act allows for exemptions to approval to be considered at the discretion of municipalities. And what we mean by exemptions, they're a common tool across the province that recognizes that where a comprehensive planning process has already been undertaken for a condominium proposal, given the recent history of approvals for the site, additional planning review may not be necessary. So in recognition of the efficiencies associated with the condominium exemption process, it has been a long-standing practice of the town of Collingwood to process exemption requests on a case-by-case basis. And that process has been undertaken as a staff delegated authority. So there is already an application form, there is already a fee structure that are established for this type of activity. However, the current wording of the bylaw that provides that delegated authority is unclear, and there's no criteria, written criteria available to guide either staff in their decision-making process or available to the development community and the public to better determine or understand what types of condominium description or under what circumstances staff would consider an exemption to be appropriate. So therefore, tonight staff are recommending that should it remain the intent of council that the current practice be formalized by amendments to the relevant bylaw and the adoption of criteria guiding condominium exemptions for standard, phased, and common element condominium descriptions in a way that protects the public and municipal interests and allows for a bump up process to committee and council. If approved, staff will enhance the internal processes that already exist around condominium exemptions and prepare a communication plan for the development community. That concludes a summary of the report, and happy to answer any questions at the appropriate time.
Thank you. Any questions or comments from the public on this, Deputy Clerk Dahl?
Thank you, Chair Hamlin. If anyone's wishing to speak to the staff report, if you could please press the raise your hand feature. And there's no one wishing to speak to the staff report.
Thank you. I'll read in the recommendation. The staff report P 2021-36 titled Delegated Authority and Criteria for Condominium Exemptions be received. And further, that council enact and pass bylaw number 2021-082, being a bylaw to amend bylaw number 2013-034, the designating signing authorities Planning Act as follows. 1, clarify the process for condominium exemptions, and 2, to explicitly delegate authority to the Director of Planning, Building, and Economic Development, or their designate, to exempt certain classes of condominium description from approval under the Planning Act, subject to criteria. And further, that staff develop the appropriate internal processes to facilitate the implementation of condominium exemptions based on the criteria outlined in Appendix A, including a communication plan for the development community. Could I have a mover and a seconder, please? Mayor Saunderson and Councillor Doherty, thank you. Would any member of the Standing Committee like to comment? Councillor Jeffrey and Mayor Saunderson.
Thank you, Chair Hammond. So just through to Director Valentine, just out of curiosity, what kind of volume of decisions would we be speaking about over the course of a year with respect to the condo exemptions?
Through you, Chair Hamlin, to the councillor, that's an excellent question, and I don't have those stats at the tip of my fingers. Happy to provide those. I would hesitate to really give a number at this point because it would just be speculation on my part. But it's my understanding that it has been relatively common practice for the town to exercise this authority through staff. So happy to provide those statistics to council separately in an email. Perhaps over the past few years, how many have taken place. It is quite common after a zoning bylaw amendment and a site plan have already been approved that the next step for land division or for ownership division really has no additional merit to bring someone through a process, since there have been 2 recent Planning Act processes. So that is typically when this type of tool is deployed.
Just as a follow-up, Chair Hamlin, so I appreciate that response. I definitely agree with the process that's proposed. And why I was asking about volume is I was just wondering about if in this process will be built in a report to council on an annual or quarterly basis as to how the delegated authority was used. I just was wanting to try to get a handle on whether I was asking for something that was astronomical or if it was manageable, or if it could be considered in the process.
Thank you. I guess Mayor Saunderson, you're next.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just to pick up a little bit on the thread that Councillor Jeffrey was pursuing, my understanding through you to Director Valentine is that we're looking at this delegated authority where there have been planning processes embarked on, which happens in several of the 5 categories of condominium developments. And where that is not the case, like vacant land and leasehold, you're exempting that. You're saying that delegated authority would not apply to that because there are more planning processes to go through. So really, this is a way, I guess, for efficiency through our processes. while at the same time ensuring that proper planning processes are followed. So maybe you can just confirm if that is the case, and if not, what's different.
Thank you.
Through you, Madam Chair, I would agree completely with your comments, and that is an excellent summary of the intent of the staff report, is to gain efficiencies where there is no added value for embarking on further planning processes, but in the circumstances where further planning processes are of merit to protect the public and municipal interests, those would continue to be processed in a similar manner to plans of subdivision as we do today. And just circling back very quickly to Councillor Jeffrey's comments, and perhaps CAO Skinner may wish to weigh in, but I do understand that there's been more requests than just related to Planning Act delegated authority as to what the appropriate avenue is to report to council when staff is exercising delegated authority at large. So certainly happy to participate in whatever process is determined appropriate for that type of reporting. And I would imagine it wouldn't be overly onerous given the number of applications that we would see in a year of this type.
Good, thank you very much.
Thank you. I just have a comment, which is, well, two comments actually. One, thank you so much for noticing our bylaw wasn't clear and didn't have criteria in it. I think that's really important for this council, who has been trying, to implement every opportunity we can to make sure our processes are clear and transparent. Secondly, I just wanted to share something I was thinking about in terms of early on, I would say 3 years ago, we had a development come before us. It was in the west end of town off of 26. And I recall asking why we weren't asking for certain requirements to be made of the developer. And the answer was it was being done by site plan and it was exempt from condominium status. So my comment is that I hope when staff is doing these kind of things, that they make sure that whatever we would normally get through the condominium/subdivision approval process, which sometimes is a bit more rigorous, that we're able to get it before we sign off on the process, because I don't think staff was previously looking at that. Okay, so yes, go ahead, Director Valentine. Yeah.
Oh, just very quickly, if I may. Thank you, Chair Hamlin. And I just did want to note to the committee that that is exactly one of the criteria that is being proposed in the staff report, is that there is no other matter that we would need to have that hook to deal with through conditions of draft approval associated with a condominium description. So staff would be looking at to make sure that everything has been covered off through the zoning bylaw amendment and site plan approval processes. And if there's anything additional, then the application wouldn't meet the criteria and it would have to go through that larger process. So that is part of the criteria that staff would be using on a go-forward basis if determined appropriate by council.
Oh, that's fantastic. Thank you. Okay. All in favor? And that's unanimous. Thank you. The next staff report is item 7.4. The staff report is PW 2021-20, assumption of the Mountaincroft subdivision phases 4 and 5. Director Salma, will you be doing the presentation here?
Yes, I will, Chair Hamlin. Thank you. The nature of this report is fairly administrative. The Mountaincroft subdivision is located at the corners of Poplar Side Road and High Street. The subdivision was comprised of 6 phases, and the first 3 phases, 1, 2, and 3, were assumed by the municipality in November 2020. The developer has fulfilled their obligations under the terms of the subdivision agreement now for phases 4 and 5. Staff have inspected all of the municipal infrastructure that was constructed and are satisfied that the works was constructed and completed in accordance with all standards and with the executed subdivision agreement. Therefore, the recommendation is for the municipality to assume the subdivision and pass a bylaw to assume the roads as well.
Thank you. Any questions or comments from the public?
Thank you, Chair Hamlin. If there's anyone wishing to speak to the staff report, if you please press the raise your hand feature. And there's no one wishing to speak at this time.
Okay, I'll read in the recommendation. The staff report PW 2021-20, assumption of Mountaincroft subdivision phases 4 and 5 be received, and that council approve the assumption of all municipal works within phases 4 and 5 of the Mountaincroft subdivision, and that council enact and pass bylaw number 2021-084, being a bylaw to assume the roads within phases 4 and 5 of the Mountaincroft subdivision. Could I have a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Jeffrey and Councillor Doherty, thank you. Would the standing committee have any questions or comments? Seeing none, all those, oh, yes, Mayor Saunderson, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and through you to Director Slama. Peggy, I know we're talking just about the roads, but maybe you could talk a little bit about the stormwater management and at what point in time that would be assumed by the town.
Yes, through the chair to Mayor Saunderson. Yes, good question. Thank you. So the assumption of these phases of 4 and 5 does not include the stormwater pond. That there's one more phase to be completed. An assumption of the stormwater pond and stormwater works will be part of that final phase, which is currently in the warranty period. So shouldn't be too much longer.
Any follow-up?
No, that's great. Thank you.
Okay. Seeing no other questions, all those in favor? And that's unanimous. Thank you. The last staff report before us tonight is PW 2021-18, Transit Service Review and Optimization Study, Final Recommendations. And Director Slama, I might turn this over to you.
Yes, thank you, Chair Hamlin. I'll just introduce the report, and we do have Coordinator Chris Wisniak with us this evening. I believe I can't see him. Is he? I better check. Make sure. Yep, perfect. Okay, he's here. Coordinator Wisniak has been working very diligently over the last year on many aspects of our transit service delivery. And, about a year ago, we were working on extending our service contracts for conventional transit services as well as our specialized. And that was to allow us a bit more time to go through transit study review and optimization study. So Chris worked closely with our consultants, IBI, on that review, and that the final report written by the consultants was presented to committee at the last DNO. So before you this evening, we have the staff recommendation that's related to that study. And, this was staff's review of the study and determination so that we could determine what was the best solution to go forward or way to go forward with the municipality providing transit services to our community and include both conventional and specialized. So with that, I will pass it over to Coordinator Wisniak.
Thank you.
Thank you, Director Slama. Okay, so to begin, if we can get to the first slide. The background, we started the transit service review and optimization study pre-COVID. The main part of the study occurred almost mid-pandemic. So the entirety of the report under our terms of reference included 5 major items, which was evaluating our current routes, the route structure and the ridership performance, evaluating our current and future transit service delivery options, the recommendations for a transit level of service policy, looking at our area transit and our municipal partners, and developing a 5-year growth plan. Now, although we did look at the system pre-COVID, so 2019 was our last year of ridership and performance that was at a measurable level in comparison to other municipalities. The consultant looked at evaluating our system and providing service delivery options that also allowed the municipality to pivot in a way to meet the new demands and the reduced ridership due to COVID. So the consultant evaluated three different types of service delivery, one being fixed route, one being hybrid, and one being on demand. And the consultant provided 9 final recommendations in the report. And again, the report was released to the public and to council at the beginning of October with final comments and questions from council and the public closing on the 19th of November. And we've included those additional comments in this report. So without further ado, we'll get to the final recommendations modified by staff. So we'll see in this first recommendation that the IBI group has recommended that we receive and adopt this report and the 5-year transit plan as the basis for planning and managing transit services in the town of Collingwood over the next 5 years. It's the recommendation of staff that we receive IBI's report and adopt their 5-year plan in a phased and modified approach as we're about to outline and has been outlined in the report provided to council. The reason why we've added the phased and modified is that there are several items in the study that will affect the overall service delivery within the community. And what we don't want to do is have a large impact to riders all at once. So if we implement everything all at once, we can see difficulties with rider implementation, service delivery implementation. So by phasing these recommendations and modifying them, it will allow us to be able to implement the recommendations properly without the large impact to riders. And again, one of the largest portions of these recommendations is the municipality's responsibility to provide an implementation plan and rider training so that we can provide the most convenient transitions to riders in our municipality. And all major changes that we are doing, we should also consider the additional need for staff resources and commitments and or capital items that would require any future year budgeting requirements. Next slide, please. The second recommendation, and probably the largest recommendation and will have the most impact to our transit system, is the adoption of an on-demand service strategy beginning in Q3, which around July, August 2022, which will align with our new operation contract. Staff are recommending to adopt the on-demand service strategy in Collingwood. And there are several reasons behind that. We did evaluate several different methods of service delivery, being fixed route, and a hybrid and on demand. But with the ridership that we are experiencing at our current level, both the Collingwood Transit and Blue Mountain Link are about 55% less than they would be in a normal year. So comparison to 2019. So with 50% less ridership, we are seeing decreased revenues. So with the ability, with on-demand gives us the ability to increase our service area without increasing service costs. So our transit service prior to COVID was reaching a plateau. We hadn't yet expanded to meet the needs of existing developments. So if we look at the south end of Collingwood, into Summit View, into Mountaincroft, Pretty River Estates, we currently do not service those developments. With the implementation of an on-demand service, this will allow us to expand our service and potentially tap into a resource for additional ridership. The recommendation is for the Caltrans service only, so only within the Collingwood municipal boundary. The Blue Mountains link is not recommended to move to an on-demand service due to the length of its travel pattern. And the majority of the service, the ridership on the Blue Mountain link is origin to destination. So strictly from Collingwood to resort. So we're not seeing too much interim pickup along the routes. So having an on-demand bus service a call at, say in Blue Mountain, and then it would go out, pick up a call there, and then somebody would call it again. It would be inefficient to send 3 buses out to Blue Mountains altogether. So the recommendation would only be for the in-town services, which would allow us to expand our service. The other benefit of the on-demand service is that there's a reduction of fuel and maintenance costs. Now, I've spoken to two other municipalities, being Stratford and Belleville. I've spoken with Stratford more closely, and they've seen a drastic reduction in the amount of fuel consumption when they implemented their on-demand service. They have implemented their service only on weekends, but they have seen a massive uptake in ridership, specifically from the student and millennial demographic. It's actually increased so much that they've added an additional fixed route to supplement the on-demand. The implementation of the on-demand service, we do understand that it may cause some anxiety to some riders. However, again, one of the largest strategies that we have to implement is our ridership and communication plan. And I believe a comprehensive interdepartmental strategy will have the best effect to deliver the best information to our community and to allow some open houses and travel training for our riders to make this a very successful initiative. There are some additional capital funds for the on-demand platform. So this would be the technology to use and book a ride. Now, when we're looking at on-demand service, the on-demand service model, essentially what it will be doing, it will be utilizing our existing transit bus rolling stock, so our transit buses, and our existing stop infrastructure. And instead of our buses running around a route circuitously in a circle, the buses will only be called to the stops when a rider has made either a request through an app or through a telephone call. So we eliminate buses driving around town empty. And I believe that this is one of the largest issues we need to address, especially during the COVID pandemic, with our ridership being down above 50%. And there is additional funding opportunities that can help subsidize the implementation of the on-demand service. There is the Safe Restart Agreement funding, which has been offered by the province to help aid in some of the COVID financial losses. That funding can also be used for capital initiatives to help reduce greenhouse gases and help address the need for reduced ridership. The Green Municipal Fund also supports on-demand and micro-transit strategies for municipalities that are looking into altering their service delivery method. There have been some issues raised with on-demand services, being that you cannot just walk out and catch a bus at any given time. I have brought up this issue with our consultant and with Stratford specifically, and dealing with Stratford, they had not had any issues with riders having the inability to use a telephone or not have access to telephones. But what Stratford had done, they had worked with their Ontario Works programs for cellular phones for people who are on Ontario Works. And they also worked with large trip generators, being either big box stores, grocery stores, where riders would be able to use phones in these facilities to be able to call the on-demand transit bus. So there's a lot outlined in there, and it was further outlined in the report. But our recommendation as staff is that we do move forward with the implementation of the on-demand service in July, August of 2022. Next slide, please. The third recommendation from IBI Group was to combine our conventional and specialized transit services into one contract once we begin our RFP process to obtain a new contractor for our next term. The combination of specialized service and conventional service will allow both of our services to be under one contract and managed with one provider. Currently, we have 3 different providers with all of our transit services. We have Landmark Bus with our conventional, Red Cross service doing our parallel accessible, and Collingwood Ace Cabs doing an on-demand taxi service. By implementing both services under the same contract, we currently have 2 buses that we provide to Red Cross that we would be able to retain and utilize for the accessible service. As well, moving to the on-demand service and conventional has an additional benefit to specialized service in that we can utilize an on-demand platform for our accessible services. So somebody could pre-book using an app or making a pre-book telephone call. And the benefit of this also is that if we are seeing low demand in low peak times on our conventional transit, we can utilize conventional transit buses to operate as accessible buses in our specialized transit. So there's the ability to see some cost savings by sharing double duty on some of our transit vehicles, which could help us reduce costs in the future as well. We do expect costs to increase from the Red Cross contract. Being a non-for-profit agency, the Red Cross costs are on the low side. Moving into a larger contract, we would be seeing costs, hourly costs similar to the operation of a transit bus. But again, with some of the sharing of services with conventional and the on-demand system, we may be able to reduce costs further. Next slide, please. The 4th recommendation from IBI was to implement a fare structure identified in this report with a fare increase beginning in Q3 2022. Collingwood has not seen a fare increase since 2013. In comparison to the rest of the municipalities in Ontario, I believe Collingwood, Wasaga Beach, and Cobourg have 3 of the lowest fares in Ontario. I have also spoken with staff over at Wasaga Beach who are also looking at implementing something similar as we move towards implementing a new contract. So with the increase of the cost of living, CPI, and fuel costs, we are recommending that a 50-cent increase in 22 be implemented in Q3, with another 25-cent increase in 2024, and a further 25-cent increase in 2026, a total of $3 in 2026. There is a potential to, by 2026, to almost reach 80% of our pre-COVID level revenues strictly by fare increases alone. If we begin to see fare increases of up to 25%, we could almost reach 90% of our existing revenue from 2019 from a 20% ridership increase and the $1 fare increase. Next slide, please. The 5th recommendation and 6th, I believe, there was 2 that were together, which were exploring the pooling of resources and operations management functions for South Georgian Bay transit services. So this would include Collingwood, Blue Mountains, Wasaga Beach, and Clearview, and implementing a single contract between municipalities and governed by a coordinating committee with staff representation from each municipality, and to pursue improved and additional intermunicipal connections to area municipalities with the Simcoe County and area municipalities as well for improved fare and service integration to include 2 new routes, Nottawa to Collingwood and Stayner to Collingwood. There was a lot included in that recommendation from IBI. Given the amount of work and changes that Collingwood will be undergoing within the next year, moving to integrate services at this point, I think would be a little bit of a too fast scenario. What staff are recommending is the reestablishment of a South Georgian Bay Transit Working Group to carry forward the mission statement of the original Transportation Working Group, which was to foster a working relationship with our communities to improve transit and connections within our region. Now, the Transit Working Group was first implemented in 2016, and it included all of our area municipalities, including the Blue Mountains, Clearview Township, Wasaga Beach, the town of Collingwood, as well as a large number of our major employers, and it was an excellent resource, and it was an excellent group. And at that time in 2016, 2017, we made some accomplishments by establishing a clear level of service across municipalities, strong connections across municipalities, and an extension of hours across municipalities. So we feel that the reestablishment of this working group would provide better planning towards future connections and services. It will help identify regional transportation needs and complement the County of Simcoe's Transit Master Plan. And it will also allow collaboration of resources for joint projects and improving communication to municipalities and their respective councils. Next slide, please. The sixth recommendation from IBI was to work with the County of Simcoe to return the Collingwood-Wasaga Beach link to the town of Collingwood. This is the only recommendation that staff are not supporting in the report. I have spoken with the County of Simcoe, and both the County of Simcoe and our staff agree that this may not be the time for this changeover. It does not fall within the County of Simcoe's master transit plan. And at this point, it cannot be supported with our staffing resources in Collingwood. But we can consider for future planning and acquisition through the Regional Transit Working Group. And I think that's something that we can continue to keep a discussion open. And we can also work at establishing better fare integration between the services in our region in the interim. Next slide, please. The seventh recommendation is to develop a strategy to assess the feasibility of the introduction of battery electric buses to our fleet based upon the outcome of the Metrolinx collaborative study. So I have been working closely with Metrolinx over the past 3 to 4 months. Metrolinx, along with 13 other municipality transit authorities, have been developing a roadmap to battery electrification of transit fleets. What Metrolinx has done is created a terms of reference for feasibility studies for municipalities of our size. And what they are doing is putting together a professionally written RFQ process to put out a document that would allow the town of Collingwood and other municipalities to obtain services from a consultant to do a feasibility study scoped by Metrolinx. The costs for these feasibility studies have been approved by the Federal Zero Emission Transit Fund. So Infrastructure Canada has already approved that these will be accepted under the application process. And under this program, there are options to include additional municipal vehicles and facilities in the feasibility analysis. This study is expected to begin in Q3 or Q4 in 2022. The benefit of this feasibility study is that although the scope of it right now does not include municipal vehicles, Metrolinx has added that it's almost like a piggyback clause that in the event that we wanted to include municipal vehicles being snowplows or large fleet, that we could in this study. And the benefit of that is that we would have a feasibility study for our larger vehicles, which in turn would help us for future funding programs that may come available. Next slide, please. The final recommendation from IBI is to add staff resources to more effectively plan and manage the transit services with a technical support person equivalent to a 0.5 FTE. Should the town enter into a collaborative agreement with the area municipalities to manage their transit services, then staff resources could be or would be augmented further. Staff do support the inclusion of this recommendation within the phased 5-year transit plan after a proper evaluation of the new service can be completed to further support the need for additional staff. So currently the staff allotment, and that would be my time, for transit services is 35%. The remainder of my time is allocated to public works duties. IBI's feeling were that there is more needed on the contract oversight to enforce contract compliance. In addition to that, there are a large amount of other duties that that come with transit services, especially when we're dealing with multiple contracts. And also trying to find ways to garner new ridership, work at marketing, working at communication. As IBI indicated, the planning, general management, communications need to be increased to more effectively promote, improve, and increase service levels within Collingwood. So I believe we are asking for consideration in the 2023 budget after a proper evaluation on this position can be completed by the public works staff. Next slide. So we did receive some other additional comments, both from council and from the public, about some of the ideas that came from the transit study and some other concerns that there may have been. So I believe there are 6 other comments that I've addressed in the report and I've outlined here. So it's exploring the feasibility and advertising, utilizing the Collingwood transit fleet and related transit infrastructure. We have looked at this several times in my tenure here at the town of Collingwood. Staff do feel that with the current size of the fleet and amount of transit infrastructure, that the feasibility to implement advertising at this point does not provide enough revenue to support the initiative. I did attach a report done in 2016 that outlined in detail some of the other municipalities, including Orillia and Barrie, some of their structures of how they pursue advertising. Currently, we do not have the staffing allotment in-house to manage transit advertising, and this would be an endeavor that we would have to look at contracting out. And as we contract out, we end up losing some of our main revenue stream. So I believe that the anticipated revenue for a fleet of our size was approximately 14,500 annually guaranteed revenue, which did not factor in staff time. So we still believe that the report of 2016 is still valuable at this point, and the information is still at this point gives us enough reason for the decision to not proceed with advertising at this point. Point number 2 is the utilization of green municipal funding to offset on-demand implementation costs. And I am working with the finance department. We are looking currently right now submitting an initial review form to the Green Municipal Fund for consideration for the on-demand service implementation for 2022. So that was the $80,000 potential capital costs in the event that council does approve the on-demand service strategy. Point number 3 was the extension of hours on the Collingwood Blue Mountain Link. This is something I have already discussed with our Town of Blue Mountains partner, and we will be working with them closely over the next year while we negotiate our working group service agreement, which includes the Blue Mountain Resort, Blue Mountain Village Association, the Town of Blue Mountains, and the Town of Collingwood. So we will work at finding ways to negotiate the extension of hours and see if it's something that all parties do agree upon. Next slide, please. Number 4 was the review of staff time allocation to partner services. So beginning in 22, staff will be tracking our dedicated time allocated to our partner services to enable our administrative costs to be charged back to our partner municipalities. This is something that we had not done in the past. This is also something that we will be including in our contract negotiations with our Blue Mountain Transit Link partnership agreement in 2022. And point number 5, there was a question, will there be any funding implications to the change in service delivery method? Currently, we do not anticipate any of our current funding arrangements to be discontinued or change as a result of our service delivery method. Our provincial cast tax will still be allocated based upon our population size of Collingwood and our ridership. Our ICIP funding, which is our capital funding for transit buses and related infrastructure, will still continue as that program goes into 2027 and 2028. We may also have the potential to access additional funding through, again, the Green Municipal Fund and our Safe Restart Agreement as we move to the on-demand service. Next slide, please. Following our last meeting with our Development and Operations Committee, there was a question about integration of fares with our partner services. I immediately had a meeting the next day with the County of Simcoe and the town of Wasaga Beach. And this is something that we're going to be working on at the beginning of this year to try and establish a way that we can provide a seamless fare transition for riders across our region in the interim, especially so that we can have riders travel across our systems using the same pass, essentially. All of our transit systems use the same technology and fare management system. So we're going to be working with our transit service provider, our fare management provider, to look at ways that we can integrate our services and allocate our revenues accordingly. Next slide, please. Financial impacts. So our on-demand service for our conventional service, and including the Blue Mountain Link, so this is our entire conventional service, we would see a 35% decrease in fuel and maintenance cost based upon what other municipalities have seen with the implementation of on-demand services. We anticipate around $50,000 increase in our service contract costs. So that we have been with our current service provider for 7 years, Landmark Bus, and we will be going out for new services this year. So we are anticipating an increase in contract costs just with the way that the labor market is and fuel costs are. Our specialized accessible service, we are anticipating a $68,000 annual increase of our current costs. The 2022 costs would not see that much as our contract goes until August. So we would only see about 5 months of increased costs for 2022. And again, our estimated costs do not factor in our potential of using conventional service to operate a specialized service during off-peak times. This would again allow normal transit service to be utilized for accessible service, where we could see a large savings in operation costs. And again, our phased fare increases. We believe that we can reach 80% of pre-COVID levels, COVID revenues, by 2026, based upon fare increases alone. And we can see 20 to 30% of a potential increase in revenue with new ridership and the increased fares. So if we begin to see an increase in ridership that would meet our pre-COVID levels, we could see a 30% increase in our revenues based upon the 2019 numbers. Next slide, please. So our next steps, following council's decision today and the following council meeting, we would be moving into our contract RFP process. So once we get an approval of how we will be delivering transit, we can now define our service level for our contract RFP process, which we hope to have out by mid-January 22, with a selection of a successful proponent by March. And then if we move to an on-demand service, we will be doing an RFP for on-demand platforms, the technological platform that would be utilized for on-demand services, and then move into the spring and summer doing a communication strategy and rider training education plan, and then looking at a new contractor transition. So whether or not we get a new contractor or our existing contractor bids on it again, I'll be looking at a transition in June, July 22, and the implementation of the new service in August of 22. So I know that was a lot of information, and I'm sorry if I spoke too fast or too quickly, but that is the end of the presentation, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Okay, well, thank you very much for that presentation. It's an exciting time for our town, that's for sure. Deputy Clerk Dahl, any members of the public?
Thank you, Chair Hamlin. If there's anyone wishing to speak to the staff report, please press the raise your hand feature. And there's no members of the public wishing to speak at this time.
Thank you. I'll read in the recommendation. The council received staff report PW 2021-18, Transit Service Review and Optimization Study, final recommendations, and that council approved a phased implementation strategy for recommendations 1 to 5 and 7 to 9 of the recommendations from IBI Group outlined in their final report, and that council approved the on-demand service delivery method as recommended to be initiated at the start of the next operations contract in July 2022, and that staff include the recommendation to consider 1 FTE dedicated to transit in the 2023 budget considerations. Could I have a mover and a seconder, please? Thank you, Mayor Saunderson. And Councillor Doherty. Would the standing committee like to ask some questions? Mayor Saunderson and Councillor Doherty and Councillor Jeffrey.
I think we're going to have a good discussion on this one, and thank you very much to Coordinator Wozniak for this report. It's extensive and very important, certainly as we look at our sustainability agenda moving forward. Having good transit in our community is essential. So through you, Madam Chair, to Chris, I just wanted to get a better understanding of the impacts of COVID, because it seems to me that based on our decrease in ridership with COVID, it's allowing us an opportunity to look a little harder at the service delivery model. Am I right on that, or would we be doing this if our riding had stayed the same?
Yes, through you, Madam Chair, to Mayor Saunderson. I believe that this is kind of the extra push that gets us into on-demand. Just with our levels, we haven't seen a bounce back like some other municipalities have seen. A lot of other municipalities have university and college in their municipalities. They're getting that back. We're seeing labor shortages in town, and that makes up a lot of our transit ridership. So, I live in town. I see buses that don't have people in them. I think that the switch to on-demand I think it's a logical choice. And I think it's the most cost-effective way to be able to deliver services and to deliver it wholesome to the whole municipality. So currently we're not doing that. And with on-demand, we expand our service area to encompass the entire municipality. And I think that's a great part of on-demand. And I think one of the other things that I didn't notice, or I didn't mention in the presentation, was that going to on-demand doesn't mean that we can't go back to fixed route. It's an extremely flexible system. And in the event that we see ridership jump again, we've got information from our on-demand system that essentially plots out where our trip generators are. And if we need to put in a fixed route, we know exactly where to put it based upon our trip demand. So again, I do believe that the level of ridership that we're at right now, I think it necessitates a change. And I think the on-demand is, it can be a little anxiety fulfilled, but I think it's a good move. And I think the success in the other municipalities has proved what a great impact it can make.
Thanks for that, Chris. And I have a number of questions, Madam Chair, so if you're okay, I'll ask.
Go ahead.
And you kind of struck on my next question, and you note in your report that especially in Stratford, the ridership has increased to a level, and they've reinstated some of their fixed routes. And I guess that's in conjunction with some of the on-demand services as well. So they've actually got their ridership back to a point where the business case can be made to have both models at the same time.
That is correct.
Okay, that's good news. And I'm wondering, there's a talk you mentioned in the report that the shift to on-demand is also expected to have good environmental consequences in terms of reduced fuel consumption, maintenance costs, and the overall environmental impacts. Can you explain how that would work?
So currently our buses operate on an hour schedule. So our buses are running around town doing all of our different routes. The way that on-demand will work is that buses would go downtown to our transit terminal, and each bus has a tablet inside of it, and it's dynamically routed based upon a call. So it works similar to an Uber, but a little bit more advanced. So it works more like a ride share. So as somebody makes a call, a bus would go out. And if somebody made another call and that bus had the ability to still make, and again, we're looking at a 15 to 25 minute travel time average for a rider. So that's significantly lower than where we're at right now. We're around a 45. So we're going to guarantee a 15 to 25 minute time and utilizing our same number of buses. So as another call comes in, that bus is dynamically routed to another stop. So we don't do door to door, we utilize our existing stops. So somebody would pick that stop and we would go there. So when there's no demand, the buses aren't running. So we're not going through that fuel, just running around town, not picking people up. We're only going as we're called. So after our first few months of running on demand, we would see where we're at, how many vehicles we need. So currently we run 3, we might only need 2. And as we progress, we might even find that we might not need full-size buses. We might be able to operate as a microtransit level. And these are the benefits of on demand and going to this next level. And certainly there are a lot of provincial mandates, especially with COVID. I know the province has encouraged municipalities to explore on demand and microtransit, and there is funding available for these endeavors. So we also look at the lower maintenance costs, the bus not running as much as they're supposed to be running. They're not running all around town all the time, so we can get better fleet transition throughout the day, doing better maintenance on the buses. Because we're a small municipality and a small fleet, it's often a little bit difficult to run with the number of buses we have. So I think that this is certainly going to help out. And I know I've spoken with Stratford's manager of transit a few times, and they've seen really good numbers come out of their reduced fuel and maintenance costs.
That's a great answer. Thanks, Chris. And through you, Madam Chair, you talk about how this can also, we can combine our conventional bus service with the specialized transit. And we've gone through in the last 18 months and a significant number of issues with making sure that we keep that specialized transit going. For it's very important that we have that to serve our residents. And you say there's going to be some spillover here, and I would imagine it's in the type of service delivery model, and so that by switching to the on-demand model, and one, it makes us more efficient in doing it in the specialized transit. Is that the thought there? Is that the rationale?
Yes, through you, Madam Chair, to Mayor Saunderson. The benefit of having the on-demand platform, so the system where people can call in, where they can use the app. So if you logged in and you said convention, you'll have transit or accessible transit as your first option. You had accessible transit. Accessible transit will be a door-to-door service. That is part of our mandate through AODA. And that's what we have to our service level requirement is. So if the person is unable to reach a normal bus stop on their own, then you need to provide specialized parallel accessible service. So our thought is that we start off with our 2 existing buses that the Red Cross currently uses. They're still fairly newer buses. So those 2 buses would be allocated to specialized service to begin with. But if we're seeing areas where our conventional service is operating at a minimum, so low ridership, we wouldn't have to use those buses. Our buses, our transit buses are fully accessible. So that bus could deviate from wherever it is to a home to pick up a specialized service candidate and take them to wherever they have to go. So we're able to do double duty on the buses. And this is a model that they've used in the United States quite a bit. I've sat in on quite a few webinars that they've done for Uber Transit, actually. And in Austin, Texas is where they've implemented this, and it's been widely successful. So they're using it a lot, not everywhere yet, but certainly with the amount of companies that are out there doing on-demand service right now, the demand is really, really high. And there are a lot of transit authorities moving this way.
Thank you for that. My last question through you, Madam Chair. I agree that with respect to recommendation number 6, that we the Collingwood Wasaga Beach link with county Simcoe links. But I'm just wondering, my last question is, with the on-demand, how would that interface with the fixed route scheduling of the Simcoe links, the county Simcoe links program?
Well, it will still, the County of Simcoe service will still arrive at its scheduled time. The benefit of our ending of our routes would still be at the transit terminal. So there may be the ability for a rider that may have to wait an additional time for the next bus to come. Currently, even with our service that we're at right now, we're still running at a modified schedule for our conventional service, which is the Sunday schedule that we implemented at the beginning of COVID. And not all of our times line up with the county schedule. So some riders who are transitioning from Blue Mountain to the Simcoe County links, they may have a wait at our terminal, but it's not something that we haven't seen in the past.
Okay, thank you. Those are my questions, and compliments to Director Slama and Coordinator Wisniak and all staff involved. This is an important report, and I'm looking forward to seeing it move forward.
Thank you, Ms. Saunderson, and I've forgotten who's next. Was it, yes, okay, Councillor Doherty, thank you. Over to you.
Thank you, Chair. I'm also very supportive of this staff report and its recommendations. I really see, in particular with the transition or the proposed transition to on-demand transit as being, potentially one of the most significant actions that the town has taken to date in reducing its carbon emissions, not only through the efficiency of the operation of our buses, but also hopefully by creating a service that is so convenient that we increase ridership and take more cars off the road in so doing. I also see this as having great potential ability to enhance our economic development initiatives by making it easier for staff to efficiently get to where they are working and back home again. Sorry, there was something else I wanted to say and I've lost it. But I do have a couple of questions though. First of all, you're indicating that the on-demand program could be in place by July. It seems like an aggressive schedule. Is it?
Councillor Wisniak, or coordinator? Don't wish that on anybody.
Through you, Madam Chair, to Councillor Doherty. It could be considered an aggressive schedule. I think that I'm looking at the timelines that I've got laid out. I think by implementing it with the new contract is an ideal time to make the changeover. But again, I think that if we can't make it by July, I don't think it's something that we couldn't postpone or push back. I think the biggest decision that we have to make is whether or not we're going to move to on-demand. That way I can scope a transit service contract so that we can get a successful contractor. Because when we're looking at a contract of that size, a 7-year, it's going to be a multi-million-dollar contract. It's something that if somebody's coming from out of town, they have to secure a facility, all these things, and it has to be in Collingwood. So it's a pretty detailed document that we've got to get out. So, in the event that we do not make those timelines, I'm sure it's something that we can negotiate with a successful proponent to implement. But I don't want to be overly confident to say that we can make it, but I'm optimistic that we can do it by the end of summer. It would be fantastic if that's something that we can do for the start of school. I think would be a great timing for it.
That's okay. Be optimistic. Go for it. That's great. Just a couple of other questions. You indicated in the report that you have contacted ISIP to advise them that you may be adjusting the town's purchase schedule for replacement buses. I'm assuming that means that we would not be moving forward with any more diesel buses at this point in time.
Through you, Madam Chair, to Councillor Doherty, I would suggest at this point that we wouldn't be buying any more full-size diesel buses. We've just taken delivery of 2 in late September. And I think given where we are, it's probably not advisable to be purchasing diesel buses. So a lot of municipalities who were approved under the ICIP program have changed their scope completely. There are a lot of people that are now doing, again, the electric bus feasibilities. They are doing facility improvements for charging. They are doing smaller buses. They're getting out of full-size buses and going into smaller buses. So, you know, we do have the ability to be flexible, and thankfully ICIP team has been fantastic with that and allowing that flexibility to meet our changing everything with COVID. So.
Terrific. Another a comment that you made during your presentation was the intention to, as we work with our other municipal partners, that we would charge off our staff costs in dealing with those municipalities so that it is not 100% burden to our own tax base. And I'm really glad to hear that. Okay, and those are my questions. Congratulations. It seems that not much more than a year ago, I presented on an on-demand service in Alberta that had hit it out of the park right off the hop, and just a little more than 1 year later to be hearing about it for our own community is very, very exciting. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Jeffrey?
So thank you, Madam Chair. So I sent Coordinator Wozniak and Director Slama 3 pages of questions and comments quite some time ago. And Director Slama told me she thought she was quite confident they could answer and respond to those in the report. And I think overall they have. I have had quite a bit of angst about this change, only in terms of, did we do enough consultation with the people who use it? I find when we're making decisions for other people, sometimes we can, forget how important that consultation is. I think the one comment that Chris made tonight that kind of helped me was that the rider information, the trip information will allow us to add a fixed conventional line back in if it's needed within, we don't have to wait till the end of the 5 years or whatever to be making those kinds of decisions. So I think overall I'm okay. It was the consultation. I wanted to make sure I liked the phasing in, and for sure there's no one who would be against the greenhouse gas emission reductions, and I've been keenly trying to get us towards electric for a long time. So thank you very much. I know this was a ton of work, and I do have one question though. I'm curious about this council recommending that staff include for a future council the FTE in the 2023 budget. I'm not really sure that's even relevant for us. I think it's something staff need to keep on their records to ask the next council about. So I'm not really sure that we need the last say in that. I'm good.
Okay, thank you so much. I have just maybe a couple of questions. Most things have been covered and comments and so on. Again, I just have to add my thanks. This is an amazing report, and it's so exciting for our town. And I know all the residents who have been lobbying for electric buses with very good reasons. I will be very happy with the recommendations in this report. I know it's been 15 years since the routes were looked at, and it was about time that we got into some of our newer neighborhoods. I'm just wondering, under this system, will there be a way to have a continually updated service area as we bring new communities, new neighborhoods online? And that's my first question.
Yes, Madam Chair. Our consultant, after their review, essentially has said that I didn't provide the map in the in my report, but it is in the overall report from IBI. The service area for Collingwood, I think, encompasses most of subdivisions that you see that have draft plan approval already. We did provide IBI all of our future subdivisions and all of our planning information. So it does allow us quite a breadth of area to move. It also allows the potential for service to Nottawa and Clearview, because we were not committed to looking at doing a fixed route all the way out that way. But that's something that, as part of a working group with our local municipalities, we can work at establishing as well. But those are all things that have to come after we solidify Collingwood's new service.
Okay, thank you for that answer. My comment on the South Georgian Bay Transit Working Group is that I know it did very good work, and that some were quite sad to see when it didn't continue. So I was very glad to hear that the suggestion is to fire that up again. And I'm hoping that perhaps this can be pushed even through our CAO working group, because I would love to see some timelines come back to council eventually about, on how we can move forward expanding our transit. And I'm thinking particularly, we've had some discussion tonight around our employers and getting their staff into their places of work. And we know that many staff don't live in Collingwood and perhaps live in Stayner, and maybe they only have one car. And if we could be providing transit, some kind of coordinated transit, recognizing the employer's needs, and also I would say our downtown business community, because people certainly come, well, certainly I know people in Clearview who drive all the way from Creemore up here to enjoy our beautiful shops. So I just wanted to really leave you with the thought that the sooner we can coordinate adjoining municipalities transit into ours, if they're of an interest, obviously, I think the better it is for everyone. Also, I was wondering, and this might be my last question, I noticed in the report that our transit service currently ends at 8 p.m. And I'm wondering if over the phase-in period, there's an opportunity to review that time frame. I'm wondering whether it should go later. And where I'm coming from with this is, the more that we leave, hopefully, COVID behind us, the more likely people may want to come in for theater or theater and dinner, and especially those who want to maybe imbibe a bit at dinner, but don't want to have to worry about driving home. With an expanded on-demand service, this is a great opportunity for us to attract more people into our core if they can get home. So those are my comments. Thank you. All right, so there's no other questions or comments. All those in favor? And that's unanimous. Thank you very much, team.
Thank you.
Number 8 on the agenda tonight is reports and minutes of committees and boards, and 8.1 are the meeting minutes of the Collingwood Heritage Committee of November 15, 2021. I'll read in the recommendation that the minutes of the Collingwood Heritage Committee meeting held November 15, 2021 be received and recommendations contained therein be approved. Could I have a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Doherty. Councillor Jeffrey, thank you. Would the standing committee have any questions or comments this evening? Okay, seeing none, all those in favor? That's unanimous, thank you. Number 9 is our consent agenda, and I'll read in the recommendation. The council herein receive the general consent agenda, and further that the information and opinions provided in the general consent agenda items are that of the authors and are not verified or approved as being correct. 9.1, Association of Ontario Road Supervisors Trade Show Update, and 9.2, various support for federal and provincial funding of rural infrastructure projects. Could I have a mover and a seconder for the consent agenda? Councillor Jeffrey, Councillor Doherty, thank you. Would anyone like to pull an item? I would. It's going to be 9.1. I really just have a question about the Association of Ontario Road Supervisors trade show. I'm wondering what this group is about, and I understand some of our staff that have been involved in this, and I was hoping we might have a brief update. Director Slama.
Yeah, thank you, Chair Hamlin. I can provide some information to the committee on the association. So the Simcoe County Road Supervisors Association is a local chapter of the provincial Ontario Roads Supervisors Association. And it's made up of members from our partner municipalities across the county. So for Collingwood, that does include our manager of public works, Daniel Cole, and as well as our supervisor of public works, Brian Gano. They're members that attend the meetings regularly. And actually our manager, Daniel Cole, is the current president of the Simcoe County chapter. And he's also the ambassador for the trade show that the letter is referring to. So the association promotes and provides professional development and training opportunities for people within that line of work. It looks at ways, collectively, they look at ways to improve best practices in the delivery and the operations and maintenance delivery of public works services across the county. And they also promote consistent public relations and communications across the county. So as a representative from the staff, I would like to thank our council for supporting our employees in being involved in this association, like Manager Cole is, and also through our training budget, right? Promoting the training of our frontline staff to go to some of the training opportunities, and also those in management that are offered, and events as well that are offered through the association. So thank you.
Great, thanks so much. Okay, if I had a mover and a seconder, yes, I have. So all in favor? And that's unanimous. Thank you. Departmental updates. We have 3 tonight. The first one is the official plan update from Director Valentine. Over to you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We wanted to take this opportunity to repeat some of the messaging that was presented in the recent public engagement for the 2022 budget. And particularly for those either on the committee or in the public watching tonight that were not able to attend those meetings and therefore missed the update on the official plan review project. The town's official plan is the document that guides growth and land use change over a 20-year time horizon. And all municipalities are periodically required to update and review their official plans to align land use planning policies with such things as the community vision, emerging trends in the land use planning world, implementation of legislative changes at the county or the provincial level, and to generally create a more streamlined and user-friendly document. The town's project, which is the official plan update, responds to the community-based strategic plan goal and objective to support and manage growth and prosperity by updating the town's land use and regulatory framework. So the actual official plan update project itself did kick off in 2019 and is being undertaken over 6 phases. The first 4 phases have already been completed, and they included project planning, as well as the community visioning exercise, information gathering, discussion papers on a variety of topics, as well as a policy options report, which provided directions to lay the groundwork for policy development. So the update is that the consultant working on the project is putting the final touches on the first draft of the updated official plan, and that includes revised schedules. And what we mean by schedules are mapping that is typically attached to an official plan, and it shows things like road networks, water and wastewater infrastructure, environmentally sensitive lands, and land use designations. So the target for release of this draft document is in January of 2022, and that release will initiate a new round of public consultation opportunities. And the overall target for completion of the project and adoption of the new official plan remains the same, which is the summer of 2022. So we do look forward to discussing the draft official plan with this committee, council, and the public, and it certainly provides an exciting opportunity to continue to advance excellence in land use planning in the town. Thank you for the opportunity to provide that update.
Thank you. Would there be any questions of Director Valentine? No, I'm so looking forward to this coming out. I keep seeing hints of what's going to be in it in various staff reports. So anyway, that's fantastic. Okay, the second update is from the Buildings Division, and CBO Miller, will you be speaking to us? Thank you.
Yes, good evening. And thank you, Madam Chair, Mayor Saunderson, members of the committee and council, and those watching from home this evening. I've been asked to do a brief presentation and update on Building Services Division. Briefly, this presentation will provide an overview of what we do: permits and inspection statistics, customer service enhancements, our customer service standards, and I'll touch briefly upon the ICBL, and briefly questions if time allows us, Madam Chair. As we move on to the next slide, there are 2 core functions of the Building Services Division in its Ontario Building Program. And I can go on providing a presentation on each of these 2 points: the administration and enforcement of the minimum standards of the Building Code. However, these are the 2 core functions. Under the Building Code Act, Council is responsible for the administration and the enforcement of the Building Code. Council is also responsible to appoint a chief building official, and it is the role of the CBO to exercise their powers and duties in an independent manner. It is also Council's responsibility under the Building Code Act to appoint as many inspectors as are necessary. Currently, we do have a complement of 6 full-time staff. That's the CBO, the deputy CBO, a senior inspector, a building inspector, a plan examiner, and our administrative assistant. Moving on to the next slide. I always ask this question: do you feel safe in these types of buildings, whether it's residential, commercial, industrial, agricultural buildings? Do you feel safe in these buildings? And quite often I say, these buildings are safe because of our highly qualified building officials. They are the ones that ensure that our buildings constructed in Collingwood meet the minimum health and safety standards in the Building Code. We ensure before a homeowner moves into their new home, or even if a business opens to the public, that the building will be safe to use. We provide certainty for the public. The public generally takes for granted that our buildings are safe. They should not have to worry that the buildings are not safe. They can be rest assured that a highly qualified building inspector has completed those inspections on that building. Without proper inspections by our highly qualified inspectors, serious safety issues could occur that could cause serious injury or even death. We have a fiduciary duty to protect the public to ensure our buildings in Collingwood are safe. Unfortunately, tragedy has occurred in Ontario before, where 2 people lost their lives in a mall collapse in Elliott Lake. In 2013, I was a participating expert representing the engineering technology professionals on the commission, and with observations learned into the tragedy, and we made recommendations to ensure that this tragedy does not occur in Ontario or Collingwood. Moving on to the next slide, as I mentioned before, we administer and enforce the Building Code Act. The administration of the building code includes review of plans. That could be new construction, renovations for all building types to ensure the compliance with applicable building standards. This also includes applicable law. That could be the Conservation Authority. In Collingwood, we deal with the NVCA, and to the west, the GCA, the Grey Salvo Conservation Authority. Could also mean the MTO, Ministry of Transportation Ontario, and the zoning bylaw as well. Those are examples of applicable law. Before we issue a building permit, we have to ensure that applicable law is satisfied. Next slide, please. With respect to enforcement, we ensure construction follows the reviewed permit drawings and is in compliance with the building code throughout the construction process. Unfortunately, we do have it at times where voluntary compliance has not been met. And that's our first goal, is we want to make sure that we have voluntary compliance with the building code. However, we do have tools within the Building Code Act to ensure that we do achieve building code compliance. And that could mean we issue an order to comply, where that person has to ensure that those items on the order to comply satisfy minimum standards. Could also mean an unsafe building, where we would issue an order to remedy an unsafe building. I would estimate in any given year, we have approximately 60 cases per year, 3 to 4 unsafe buildings. Now, unsafe buildings can also include a septic system that is not being operated or being maintained, for which it was designed to do so. Moving on to the next slide. Our industry over the years has shifted. We are becoming more of an educator as a building official rather than just an enforcer. We have to explain the reason why and behind why is it, and we have to meet the objectives of the Ontario Building Code. As I mentioned before, moving into the next slide, is that we are also an industry driver. Construction is a driver of community growth, and our approval processes need to be transparent and streamlined. As we move to the next slide, we also administer the following town bylaws in addition to the building code. We administer the sign bylaw, the swimming pool fence bylaw, and we also administer the civic addressing and street naming bylaw. On any given year, we issue approximately 250 non-building code permits, and then essentially sign permits and swimming pool fence permits. The next slide, it provides the building statistics overview. And what I've provided here is a 3-year average permit summary. Over the past 3 years, we averaged 790 building permits issued per year, $160 million in construction value, and 376 dwellings issued per year. And that's on average, 3-year average. The next slide, I've added this graph, as I think it provides a good overview of the high permit volume that our division has experienced and the levels that we currently process. Hopefully everyone can see this slide okay. The vertical bars show the total permits and they're issued, total permits issued, and they're broken down by OBC permits or building code permits, and those are shaded in blue. And the non-OBC permits I just mentioned before are shaded in gray. So that gives you the total permits that we issue in any given year. The orange line that you see is the 5-year average of permits that we've issued. And the red line shows the ratio of permits issued per staff, and the corresponding number is shown on the right vertical axis. Just a couple of observations. Between 2012 to 2015, we issued 560 permits on average per year. And as you follow the orange line, you'll see that from 2016 to year to date, we now issue 780 permits on average per year. Since 2016, our permit volume has increased almost 40%. With respect to the numbers issued per staff, the red line, you'll see the very top red line, and then number on the right axis. We reached a peak in 2019 at 250 permits issued per staff. And since that time, it has stabilized around 200 permits issued per staff. With respect to our building permit revenue, showing on the next slide, this graph represents a 10-year summary of our building permit revenue collected. Like the previous graph, the higher the number of the permits we issued, of course, the higher we have in permit revenue. And it's interesting, this slide, the 5-year average between 2012 and 2016 was $580,000. And the 5-year average in 2016 year to date is $910,000. And I'm happy to report that year to date in 2021, we have collected $911,000 in permit revenue. And this is one of our highest over the last 5 years. Actually, it's be the third highest if we continue at this rate. And we still have the month of December to go. I'd also like to provide an inspection summary. This graph, as we move to the next slide, this graph shows a 12-month accumulated inspections by month since 2019. 4,500 building inspections have been issued per year on average, and that is approximately 1,750 inspections per inspector per year. That's a high volume. I'm also pointing out that the Building Code Act requires that we must attend a construction site within 2 business days of receiving notification. And I am happy and proud to report that we have a 100% success rate year to date. That means that we have attended the building site within 2 business days, 100% of the time, year to date. Moving back to the graph, the graph shows a 12-month accumulated inspections by month since 2019. Again, we've had exceptionally high volume of inspections, especially since September 2019 to 2020. You can just see that above the median red line. That's been a very high historic inspections for us. We are currently consistently in around the 4,500 inspections, and that we'll see the same amount in 2021 as well. Moving on to service delivery enhancements. What I've done on this slide here is that what our goal is in building services, that we want to provide consistency. We want to provide clarity and certainty for our permit applications and the applicants who have submitted building permit. With e-permitting, we have successfully transitioned into a complete e-permits. There's no paper application, and we have a new public portal, and I'll go over that in a few minutes. And we continue to be streamlining our approval processes with better applications. We're finding ways to ensure that builders and the public, they provide the required documentation. We want to assist them and continue to assist them in that manner. With respect to service delivery enhancements, we are currently working on, excuse me, a zoning certificate process we hope to implement in January of 2022. And when someone comes in with a zoning certificate issued by planning services, they come to either the front service counter when we open it next year in a few weeks, or they submit that permit through the public portal. If they come to us with a zoning certificate, I'm envisioning that we can issue same-day permits, whether that be for a deck permit, finishing a basement, an accessory detached garage. We have standard deck details that we have that owners can use. We have standard deck details for an accessory building or detached garage as well. Once they come in with a zoning certificate, that provides them certainty. The certainty they can get their permit quicker, and we were certainly hoping and looking forward to that. And I don't see any reason why we cannot do it with certified models, especially with dwellings, repeat dwellings. The builders come in with a model they built 4 or 5 times previously, and that's a certified model, and they come in with a zoning certificate, we can reduce that turnaround time even down to 5 days. So that's something that we're looking forward to. Moving on to the next slide. Building permits and guides and checklists, we now have available on our website for all the various permit applications, all major permit types. Essentially, an answer to the question, what do I need to obtain a building permit? And we list all kinds of information on the website. Sometimes I worry there's too much information, however, that's on there. An example is an accessory apartment guide. Earlier this year, we worked with the Attainable Housing Task Force, and we implemented many of their recommendations. We've updated our permit guide, as well as we've updated our website for the non-technical overview. With respect to the next slide, again, on the theme of consistency, clarity, and certainty, those are the core principles of the Building Services Division. We email notifications to applicants as soon as we receive the application. We do what we call a pre-screening. So what essentially that means, once we receive the permit application through the public portal, within 2 business days, we provide them a status update of their permit application. Not only a status update, but we also provide them the reasons why we cannot issue the building permit, and we list the items that they require. Sometimes, given the nature of the permit application, we'll take that forward to zoning for the planning review, or we may ask them to submit those information before we process that application further. However, we find by doing a pre-screening, this allows us, again, certainty and clarity, is to get their building permits out the door quicker. As I mentioned before, moving on to the next slide with e-permits, you've heard this evening, on-demand transit. Well, now I offer you on-demand permits, and exactly what we have done with e-permits. Since January 2021 of this year, we have implemented our public portal. All applications are submitted through our public portal. They can, as a registered user, you can submit and you can even pay for your building permit up to $5,000. And you can submit that, and that information comes to us right through our permit system as well. Not only can they submit and pay for a permit, but they can track their permit through the entire process. And we have set up some various milestones where they can view those updates on the public portal. We have reviewed permits and issued permits electronically since September of 2018, and we find that very successful. On the matter of climate change, you can imagine on average we have 1,500 files per year, and we've done that since 2018. We do not create a paper file folder. We do not ask applicants to bring in 2 copies of the drawings. So if you can imagine, there's approximately 5,000 files to date. Just, the reduction in fuel, the reduction in carbon, the reduction in pollution. People can submit their building permits 24/7. They don't have to worry about lineup. They don't have to spend fuel trying to get through traffic and find a parking spot. So there's a reduction in carbon footprint and environmental benefit to doing e-permits and what we're doing on the e-portal as well. We also have electronic inspections. So our building inspectors, they will conduct their inspections through their iPhone or through their laptop. There's no paper reports. And again, I mentioned we do approximately 4,500 inspections per year. It certainly adds up that those paper inspection reports no longer required. That certainly adds up the savings. With moving on to the e-permits, we are at the forefront of our customer services, in delivering our customer services and streamlining in our industry. We are a recognized leader in our industry. We've had several municipalities contact us on our efficiency improvements that we have implemented through e-permits. Perhaps, Madam Chair, I can do a brief presentation on the public portal if the time allows. If not, I can certainly come back at a future committee and provide a demonstration on that. Moving into our customer service, there's an increasing reliance on building inspectors, especially for designing and quality control. Our competency, we have highly qualified building inspectors. I mentioned before, we're becoming more of an educator. Our approach, as indicated on the next slide, is that we treat our customers with empathy, respect, courtesy, patience, fairness, and in a professional manner. We will listen, ask questions, but most importantly, we will be solution focused. And this is part of our customer service standards that's available on our website. But this is, again, the core principle of who building services is. We use our specialized knowledge, especially with the objective of assisting our customers to understand the intent, but not only intent, the purpose of the prescriptive standard of the building code, to understand their legal obligations and to resolve a construction issue. Again, we're solution focused. We just don't show up on the job site and say, hey, your inspection failed, go figure it out yourself. We identify the issue, We identify why, but also we provide a solution how to bring that into conformity. And as I just mentioned, the next slide is the problem solving. Again, we will not make any promises we cannot fulfill. However, we want to assist them through the process, whether that's through the permit application or through the inspection process. Our team approach, we operate as a team, and we will coordinate our efforts in providing a consistent, comprehensive, and solution-focused approach to customer service. And I have to tell you, we operate with a complement of 6 staff. We're small, we're lean, but we're a well-oiled machine. Is all I can say. We're consistently meeting with each other on the phone, what have you, going through inspection issues that we may have or plan review. It's a great team. We have various degrees of experience, various degrees of aptitude, and what have you. And it's a well-oiled machine. And effectively, what we're doing is we're building knowledge in community, as mentioned and shown in our next slide. With respect to the interim control bylaw, I was asked just very briefly to touch upon that. As CIO Skinner had mentioned earlier this evening, building continues. We had $135 million in construction value for 2021. And so far this year, we're going to be coming close to matching that in 2021. And we still have a month to go. We're about 129 million, 130. So we'll be close to that $135 million. But again, our as I mentioned before, in our building permit stats, 2021, if you had asked me in April, especially, that we would have had such a strong year, I don't think I would have been confident. However, this has turned out to be a great year given the circumstances. And the next slide is, I believe you've seen this graph before. Again, this is the 12-month communicated housing starts. We had a bump above the median in around August. That's slightly declining, but for 2022, I am anticipating that will be up around the median or the red line, if not above. With that, Madam Chair, I thank you for allowing me to provide this update, and I'll be more than happy to answer any questions that there may be.
Okay, thank you very much, CBO Miller. Would there be any questions from the committee? Mayor Saunderson.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and through you to CBO Miller. Greg, thank you for the presentation. You've certainly been very busy. It's great to see the evolution into transactions for our residents, and the trend that we've seen continue throughout the last 4 years. I had a quick question. You were talking about inspections, and your staff are extremely busy on inspections, and you told us that you are obligated to go out within 2 days of a request, and that you've been meeting that. My question really is, what if someone fails to make a request? Because my understanding is that the inspections are done on a request basis. If somebody fails to make a request and then you ultimately get called out for a final inspection, what is the process there?
Thank you through you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Mayor Saunderson. It occurs frequently, unfortunately. However, we do have a fiduciary duty, and I've used that term before as building officials, that we have to ensure that covered inspection satisfies the minimum standards of the building code. We just can't show up and say, okay, it looks great. Actually, there was case law many number of years ago, and the case law is referenced as Pickles versus another municipality. And it was determined that that municipality was liable for a large sum of money because the building official didn't ensure that unlawful construction was uncovered. So we do have a process in place. It's through our building bulletin available on our currently posted on our website, that if there is unlawful construction that occurs, that they may be more than likely required to uncover that unlawful inspection and or obtain a professional engineer's report to assist us in making the determination that it does indeed conform with construction.
Thank you for that.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? I have one. Firstly, I'd just like to thank you for explaining the e-permit system in particular, because I can see that's a game changer for the industry and for your department. So that's very exciting. My question is, in the context of the Affordable Housing Task Force meetings, we did have a discussion about the accessory apartments, and you mentioned the new guide that you're using. But one of the questions that came up was whether it was possible to have one inspector assigned to a project where there's an accessory apartment being created. And I think the reason was it's quite complicated, often retrofitting a basement, and we're dealing with homeowners who don't have a lot of extra capital. And they wanted to ensure consistency among, decisions when they're making changes. And I'm just wondering if that was something you had a chance to consider yet, or whether you would be. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I've given some thought to this. In a perfect world, I'd love to have one inspector assigned per project. And unfortunately, I have to tell you, it's a challenge for me to do that, given because we only have 2.5 inspectors. We're doing 4,500 inspections per year. I can assure the committee that as a general principle, that is how we operate. We generally do have one inspector through the project. We don't have a policy in place. It's just unfortunate. The reason why I do not have a policy in place that we must have one inspector is there's so many variables, whether that's an inspector maybe on a sick day, could be on vacation, and we have to ensure those services are maintained. However, we do ensure that generally that there is particularly one inspector through perhaps a file that may be challenging. We also have, at times we have 2 inspectors go out. Sometimes they'll bounce ideas off each other. So what do you think of this, or what do you think of that? I do understand where the nature of the question is coming from, and that's, it's consistency. I think that's a reputation that we are challenged with throughout the industry, because we have 440 municipalities, and each have, various numbers of inspectors. And you can come up with various interpretations. So I think that's a challenge in our industry, but I can assure you that we are working on having that consistency in Collingwood.
Okay, thank you for your answer. And I'll just leave you with a comment that I think particularly in the creation of accessory apartments, which is what we so need in our community, the cost of producing them is so critical to the homeowners. So anything you can do to help would be great. So thank you for that presentation.
Thank you.
And we have one last departmental update this evening. It's from Director Slama, and it's on the Huron Street sidewalk. Oh, yes, CAO Skinner, you first.
Thank you, Chair. I probably could have added this briefly to CBO Miller's presentation, but I did want to just briefly add, often our building officials are almost invisible. They have the invisibility cloak. They're darting around town, and people don't realize the level of expertise that we have here in Collingwood, how busy they are. And they are listening to the comments that come from the public and from council. There are quite a few regulatory duties that they do take into account. And we have especially CBO Miller, but I'm sure there's others within the department who are quite active in industry associations and looking at green building practices and the like. So I hope that the public and the committee got a bit of a reminder taste of that. They probably were already aware, but we thought it was time to mention it again. Thank you.
Okay, thanks for that. Director Slama, are you doing the last update? There you are.
I am. Thank you, Chair Hamlin.
Thank you.
Yeah, I just wanted to use the opportunity to provide an update on one of our capital projects for 2021, which is the Huron Street sidewalk. If you could go to the next slide, please. Thanks, Becky. So this sidewalk is a connecting link between Niagara Street and the courthouse, or Sobeys. It's a wider sidewalk, And when this project was considered, it was because the secret trail, which runs from the courthouse to Sunset Point, was underwater with the higher lake levels. And so there was an opportunity to look at ways that we could improve the path that was followed along Huron Street that we could see residents were using. And we did move forward with this sidewalk. So now that the lake levels have retreated, residents and visitors to our community now have two options. One is to take the sidewalk that we see here, and the other, the secret trail, is now not underwater, so it is open for public use, and there is the opportunity for people who prefer to take the more private, smaller, maybe quieter route through the naturalized area. That opportunity is there. Or if you're looking for something a bit more direct to Niagara Street or from Niagara Street, we've got this sidewalk. The sidewalk also really complements or finishes that loop of connectivity with our Niagara Street pedestrian crossing. So with those two, with the satellites of the pedestrian crossing at Niagara Street and the sidewalk, really connects the two sides of the road and allows people more options when they're moving from downtown to Sunset Point and other areas. So some of the benefits of this sidewalk are the wider trail. You can see we've got some cuts in the concrete, which is typical, but these are saw cuts rather than slabs. And this is more user-friendly for bicycles and mobility devices. It's easier on those kind of wheeled devices. It's a safer option for users, particularly at night. If you could advance the slides, please. We've got some shots at night, so you can see how the street lights help illuminate the area. This route will be maintained during winter by the snow sidewalk plows. And this route, with the illumination and with the more stable path, is also safer for our own workers. Sometimes trying to navigate that secret trail was very difficult, and one of the reasons that it needed to be closed as well when the water was higher. The sidewalk has been raised, so hopefully we won't see issues of flooding. It is higher than the secret trail is or was. And people will note that there was quite a bit of vegetation removed to allow for the sidewalk to be installed. But that work was done after an assessment by an ecologist. And I would like to note that most of the trees that were removed were ash trees, and many were dead or are dying, and they would have had to have been removed anyway. So, I do think it cleans up the area nicely. Parks does intend to keep the secret trail operational while it can. They will continue to look at their options to maintain and improve that trail over the long term. And they will be looking at ways that they can enhance the sidewalk. So putting some plantings in between the sidewalk and the wetland area, maybe having a feature, maybe having a place for people to stop. So Wendy's or Manager Martin is looking at those opportunities, and we'll be considering them in the future. So I think that was most of the things that I wanted to mention. Just wanted to provide those two some pictures, and I think it's a great way to connect the active transportation routes in our community.
Fantastic, thank you. Would any of our committee members have any questions or comments? Councillor Doherty.
Thank you, Chair. And through you to Director Slama, you had indicated, and rightly so, that a lot of the trees had been removed to make way for that sidewalk. And of course, I have heard any number of comments from the public in that regard. You mentioned that there was consideration of some plantings. Would that include trees being added again to the area beside the sidewalk?
Sorry, through the chair to Councillor Doherty, yes. My understanding is that Manager Martin is considering trees along with other plantings and potentially more of a feature, even a feature of some sort. So that's my understanding.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Deputy Clerk Dahl, are there any other staff that wish to provide updates tonight?
Thank you, Chair Hamlin. I'm not aware of any, but if anyone else has any other updates, if they want to raise their hand. And I see no more updates for this evening.
Okay, well, thank you, staff, for all of that. The next item on the agenda would be public delegations. Would there be anyone wishing to speak to the committee this evening?
Thank you, Chair Hamlin. I do have one hand up in the audience. Currently, I have Jesse Hamilton wishing to speak, so I can just allow him to speak.
Hello, can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Yes, we can hear you.
Jesse.
Go ahead.
Great. Thanks for your time this evening. My family are the owners of the home at 12 4th Street, which has recently received a denial of our heritage permit, and I wanted to take this opportunity to provide an update. After the decision was made on the November 15th council meeting, we received an outpouring of support, which included letters written to the newspaper, letters dropped off at our door, strangers stopping by to voice their support. One did that just this afternoon as well, and hundreds of supportive comments online. There were some that weren't supportive as well, but I would say the lion's share of them were. As a result, we started a petition to capture this support. We thought that that was important. Within 6 days, we have over 750 signatures, of which 370 of those are from Collingwood residents and another 100 of those are from surrounding towns like Wasaga Beach, Creemore, Town of Blue Mountains. We'll provide a copy of that petition to the town clerk next week. We believe it's important for our town's elected officials to be aware in cases like this when many of our fellow community members disagree with the decision that town council has made, in this case under the circumstances. We attended a meeting today at the request of town staff, and we would like to thank town staff for reaching out to us to assist us in understanding their actions. We've been asking for better communication, and we're happy to see that this is happening. We certainly hope it will continue should others find themselves in our position in the future, although we would not wish that on anyone. At this meeting, we learned that it is very unlikely that town council would be permitted to reconsider their decision regardless of public sentiment or further consideration of the mental impact and financial strain this will put on our family if in fact there are town councillors who are reviewing this decision. This was very disappointing news for us, and I do wonder if it is a surprise to town council. We only learned on Friday of a process for reconsideration, but now we learn that that's not likely possible, and town staff is seeking official legal opinion on that. It is also interesting to note, though, and I shared this with some town councillors, there's a relatively similar issue taking place in the town of Gravenhurst at this very moment. And although their town council voiced concern about setting a precedent, they are on record also saying that they will work with that family to remove their heritage designation altogether because that town believes in prioritizing people over property. And I just think it does provide a pretty stark comparison to what's happening here. We also learned from town staff today that unless we can reach a resolution with them, and we do appreciate the fact that they've made that clear to us today, they feel that they have no choice but to charge us under the Ontario Heritage Act no later than mid-January. That's alarming for us, obviously, but that sounds to be like the course of action. Based on town staff's direction, we understand we have two remaining things that we can do. The first is an appeal through the Ontario Land Tribunal, which we would obviously have no experience doing. It also will mean, further costs to our family and continued sort of mental strain for us as we go through that process. The second is to agree to remove the paint from our house in a time frame that's deemed reasonable by the town. As members of council know, and of this committee specifically know, we feel strongly that the town process itself is equally responsible for the situation we're dealing with, and do not feel that that's a fair outcome. We will continue to research how we can work with the town towards a fair resolution, but we do grow ever more concerned about the impact this is having on our family. Giving up means a pretty substantial financial hit to us, and us feeling like we were treated unfairly, but at some point you maybe err on the side of not doing that because you can't do it anymore. I would also like to, just before I'm finished, inform you, and although we don't agree, we are doing our very best to get quotes for the remediation of the paint. It's proving quite difficult to get those quotes, but we'll continue to do that, and we'll continue to maintain an effective dialogue with the town staff. However, if the opportunity does exist for town council to reconsider their decision and put forth a different solution that helps our family avoid these unreasonable costs, or the cost of professional fees for an appeal, as well as the toll that this is taking on our family, we would respectfully implore you to do so. I just wanted to provide that update for you. I appreciate your time, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Hamilton, for waiting to the end of the meeting and providing us an update.
You're welcome.
All right, are there any, maybe I should have asked, are there any questions of Mr. Hamilton? Okay, seeing none, the next item would be other business. Yes, Councillor Jeffrey.
Thank you, Chair Hamlin. So just through to Director Valentine, and to be kind of perfectly clear, this is the fourth Director of Planning I've asked, and I think my question keeps getting a really low priority in the grand scheme of things. But as at one point as Chair of Director of Development and Operations, we had a development occurring on Mountain Road, and it was the cannabis manufacturing, and that industry has a very backward process where you have to build the building before you get approval from the government for that type of business. So the directive of the DevOps committee at that time was to ask the developer to consider also the use of the securities for replanting and replacing the vegetation and the trees and whatever was cut down for that project should it not move forward. It doesn't appear to be moving forward, and my question was if the securities were still on hand and if they were still there to be able to be used to replant at least even the berm situation that's happening at the front of the property. So I haven't heard back. I do know it was supported by council and it came from the committee, and the developer did agree to use those funds for replanting should that situation occur. So I'm still awaiting an update, so I'm not expecting it tonight, but just knowing it's my fourth ask that I'd really like to hear. So that's it. And I do think the interim director, Glenn, had alluded to the fact that there were more properties than this. And I think other councillors may have had questions on other properties. But this one specifically, I know for sure the committee and council directed and the developer agreed. So I'll leave it with you with the hopes that I can get an answer.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Jeffrey, for persevering on that question. Every time I drive by it, that site looks more and more abandoned. Oh, okay. Any other business? Okay, seeing none, it could be time for the last item on the agenda, which is the adjournment. Thank you, Councillor Jeffrey. All those in favor? Thank you all, and good night. Okay.